Hi, and welcome to Chicas, Charlando. It's our monthly webcast series with Latinx ladies and our allies discussing topics ranging from intimate partner violence towards forming families. So to get started, this month we'll be talking about the fetishization of Black and brown bodies, bigger bodies, trans bodies. So to get started, I'm going to have my panelists introduce themselves. Yes.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Koch. I'm the creative director at Housing Works, and I'm so honored to be with you all today.
Thanks for being here. Elizabeth's my friend. I'm Devin Diaz. I do capacity building here at the Commission. Brian and I, who's behind the camera, work together on a trans people grant, and I'm also a writer. That's what I do. That's me. That's now it's zoomed in on you.
Zoomed in on me. Hi, I'm Gabriela Betancourt. I am the Deputy Director of Research and Evaluation here at the Latino Commission on Aid. And I'm very happy to be here. I love Chicas.
Great. So we all know that belonging to a marginalized part of society has proven itself to influence all aspects of our lives. Our race, class, identity, and even our size can alter how we are perceived as we move throughout the world. And often this manifests in a form of racism, sexism, and bigotry. However, it can seemingly be less obvious when it impacts our interpersonal relationships. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. So to get started with our first question, how have you personally encountered the feeling of being fetishized? And where do you draw the line between a fetish and a preference?
Easy question on Tuesday.
Right.
Start. Keeping it really light. I do this is all the time, and it's I think it's hard to tell like from which angle it's coming from. Like I've had partners that really haven't fetishized me for like being trans or being like a curvier woman or like but I have. And so like it's caught me off guard when they like ask me to speak Spanish during sex, and then like I'm like oh, and then I'm like wait, they're like fetishizing like the fact that I'm Latina, and like so it's really jarring and startling when it comes up when I'm not expecting it, especially with like this new breed of people who like are really woke in the way that they like are on social media and like share things and like know certain catchphrases that like need to be said in order to come off a certain way, but then will treat you more or less how they want to, which is usually like fetishistic whenever they've kind of said all of the buzzwords that they know they need to say to get you to be down for the clown. I don't know. Do you know what I mean?
So when you say like catchwords or like buzzwords, you mean like language used to sort of make it seem like they're open-minded?
Yeah, they'll be like, I'm as a cisgender white male, I understand my privilege.
Like they know the vocabulary.
Yeah,
right.
But then when you're in an argument, they're like, you're being so crazy too. Like they're like, I don't
Latina,
yeah, like the Latina is making you really crazy and emotional right now.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, like I think I've seen it that way, and then I've also seen it like the complete opposite. So like, say on like a dating app, you encounter someone, and then like the first message is like, hey, beautiful chocolate lady. And it's like, you're not even gonna ask me my name or like anything, like you're going straight to like the fact that my skin is brown.
And they think they're coming.
Right.
Yeah. even with friendships too. I've been the trans friend that gives like context to a situation and makes it cool and political. Like, oh, that's my dad into like trans movie at the party.
That's why I invite you to.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't experienced this like in a personal like long-term dating relationship, but in terms of like the kind of harassment that women or feminine presenting people often experience in the street, like I'm tall and my weight has fluctuated throughout the years, and I get like all kinds of commentary on my body all the time, and it's like depending on what headspace you're in, it's really like some days I could feel proud of being curvy, and some days I could just want to diet forever. And like it's a really jarring experience to have someone comment something, even if it's said in a celebratory tone. If you're not like feeling yourself one day, it's like it can be like difficult.
Yeah. And like some days you're just not ready. Like when I get dressed, especially in the summer, with like the kind of body that I have, and I'm like, am I up for like dealing with it today?
Right.
Like, am I ready for like the consequences of this dress wearing?
Yeah.
Or do I put something on that's gonna make me feel hot? Like not like hot, like I'm feeling myself, but like literally like sweating. Like yeah, like I'm just gonna cut like this. Like today I made a decision. Like I just put on tights. I was like, I really just don't want the comments when I'm walking up the subway stairs and like my ass is out and from behind and like you can see it. Like I just don't want to today. But other days I'll be like, I don't care. They've seen it before.
Right.
Yeah, it's like you have to, it sounds like you have to negotiate like every moment or every day, like how you're feeling, whatever. It's weird because for me, I mean, I think part of it, I'm glad we're talking about this because I'm not sure where the line is, aside from what we were talking about, like fetish and preference, like what's like the line between fetishization and like pure objectification. So for me, it's a little different. Like I'm older. So when I was like in college and stuff, like social media was not, internet was not. And I think for me, I've never really experienced fetishization in the way that I imagine it to be, like in a very clear-cut example.
Yeah.
So let me just say, like, when I was in college, I think there were very strict sort of ideas of what someone who's Latina is supposed to look like and be like, and the kind of music that they like, and their body type, and I didn't necessarily fit into that. You know, I recognized that I could pass as white if I wanted to. But the thing is that sometimes I always felt like the guys that were kind of interested in me, it was like a perk that I was Latina, right? But I also was like, am I palatable enough for you because I'm not necessarily like a stereotype?
Right.
I don't know if that makes any sense. I never stopped to think about the whole like talk to me in Spanish thing during sex, but like now I'm thinking about it, yeah, that's come up for me. And then just growing up in the city, quite honestly, like you could be wearing like a trash bag and you're gonna hear comments, but I was never a kid that was too, you know, I didn't have really breasts, like, you know, and my butt was okay, but like I never had to deal with like the level of commentary that some of my other friends dealt with. And it's odd. It's odd on that level too, because it's sort of like I sometimes felt like I could see this behavior. It wasn't affecting me personally, but it was still affecting like people that I cared about. I don't know if that makes sense. But.
Yeah, I think the line between fetish and preference is really blurry. I was thinking about like what are some of like I don't know what my preferences are. Like my preferences are like, are you nice? Like are you funny? Like But like, I don't know if like a certain like race or like size or gender is a preference for me. But yeah, I think if you're right about what it is to like be more palatable, because I think like men might be more comfortable walking out of the house and things are like, oh, like you're going to be perceived as cis when you go to this place, so I can just like relax and not deal with what it means to be out in public with a trans girl, versus like if they were out with a girl who might be perceived as trans, then they'll be like, oh well, I don't want to deal with that. So I feel like stuff like that when you, because I experience the same thing where I can pass for white in certain spaces, like, are you only dealing with this because it's like, you're not really, are you only like pretending to deal with this because you don't really have to deal with it? It's just like a side thing, like a thing that comes additionally, but it's not like, I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you're saying.
I was thinking about how, in thinking about these topics today, like the difference between desire and fetish, or preference and fetish, like it often comes down to like something, if something is stigmatized and it gets categorized as a fetish, but then also it's in the way desire is enacted, like, or the way people express their desire, like you're saying, like, you know, are we doing anything like, you know, cis men who date trans women, it's often like considered a fetish, right? Rather than it's like being respected and honored for like love and attraction, right? And so then, but then that's like on the one hand, on the other hand, that it's up to that cis man to like be respectful of his dates and to like to get over his own shit and you know, be a responsible partner.
Yeah.
But see, this is an interesting thing. So I've talked about this with my friends, like from like when we were like in high school. It's like I look at like my preferences, and when I was younger, I'm gonna be honest, like in the sense that I like tall people, you know, like, and like people with glasses. As I've gotten older, like the sort of outward stuff has gone away more, but the stuff that has always reminded, are you kind? Are you funny? But then I'm also like, yeah, I like someone who likes to read and I can talk to about certain things. And yet I don't think of that as a fetishization, because exactly like what you're saying, like that's not necessarily stigmatized. But I remember, like, I'll go back to college again, there were certain people that it seemed like they were constantly dating the same pattern person.
Oh, that's
like,
me.
so it's like, it's not just like it's that they're, you know, that they only date people that are not of their, let's say, their race. It's that they always only date a specific, like they only date Asian women, let's say, and they only date Asian women that are a certain height and have their hair cut a certain way. And so that's where I start to feel like it goes into fetishization. We called it ethnic cravers when we were in college.
Ethnic what?
Ethnic craver. Like ethnic craver.
I think I fetishize men that don't know how to commit. I think I've been fetishizing them for the entirety of my 20s.
But is that just like growing up?
No, that was a joke. It was like,
Okay. So I was like, I don't think that's stigmatized.
no.
No, but when you were saying that, I was thinking of that episode of Masters of None, when he's going on all those first dates, like
Yes,
and he meets with another Indian woman, and they're dating, and they have this discussion about like, well, where do you draw the line? And she talks about this guy that she dated, and then she found out that four of his previous girlfriends were of Indian descent as well, and they were,
And he was like a
right,
white.
yeah.
I know that guy. Yeah.
So as you guys were talking, that was kind of like what came to my mind. It's like, where do you draw that line? How many previous partners is it like okay or not okay?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think, and when I'm out on a date with someone who's Latinx or trans or like shares any part of my identity, I find that that's usually what we end up talking about the most, and it kind of becomes our relationship or whatever it is that day becomes about that versus like two people enjoying each other. I was talking to a friend and I was saying how every interesting artist who's doing cool work in New York is dating a white person that I know, and like across the board, like writers, DJs, painters, like they're all, and like, I'm like, well, why is that? And I think there is a way of like escapism when you're around white people, where it's just like they don't, like it's so, like you watch them and they like move through the world as just a person who's like not weighed down by these things. And when you're in close proximity to it, like you can almost experience it too, by their protection in some way, by their whiteness casting the light on you, and then like
Oh my god, that totally makes me think of like Andy Warhol and like Jean-Michel Basquiat back in the day. Like,
yeah, true.
the access to certain spaces.
Yeah, I don't know, it's just a thought though. That I had. Yeah. So, and I guess that leads to like the second question is like, when does a fetish become dangerous for the person being desired? And I think that goes into a lot of like what you were saying is like they don't know, they have little knowledge about the idea of the lived experience of the person they're desiring.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I think we definitely need to qualify the word dangerous, because at the same time, I wouldn't want to, personally, I wouldn't want to take away, like if a person who's being fetishized and the person doing the fetishization, if it's like a consensual situation, then, you know, and when I mean consensual, there's also no level of coercion or, you know, violence in any way, then I wouldn't necessarily say that it is dangerous. But yeah, I wonder how much of that is more not about fetishization, but about just a relationship dynamics.
What about culturally? Like for example, like when Hollywood decides like it's the year for like Latina actresses, and then there's like Sofia Vergara, and there's like all of these like different roles and like visibility now. But when they decide like, okay, now it's done.
I think that's really interesting because I think about how when that happens, like in the media, for example, where it's like the moment for, you know, I'll speak for myself, so moment for like curvy women, right? It's like then instead of that being a moment of empowerment, often like a new standard is upheld. Like there's just like something else to achieve, or like some other like actually impossible goal.
Or it's like
Even though
Ashley
it's
Graham, who's like, Ashley Graham was like the like plus size, and she's gorgeous and she has a lot of great things to say about being plus size, but like she's like the right kind of plus size.
Yeah.
She has this black tummy.
Yeah, exactly.
She has, I'm sure she has a trainer and a nutritionist, and like she's gorgeous, but it's just like it's just still not. It's still just as difficult as what was being presented before. And then when they decide that plus size is over, then like what happens to all of those people and like jobs? Like what happens? Like can only plus size models work in the year 2017? And then after they're just out of work because no one desires them anymore. I don't know. I was speaking to someone who was trying to organize a conference and around trans issues, and they were like, 2 years ago, like the funding for it was like, here, like take all the money you want for all the trans stuff you want to do. And then it was like in 2017, it's like not, it's like losing its steam, and like we're like we don't have the same amount of access that we had in 2015 when there was like this explosion in like the Laverne Cox Time magazine cover and all of that. So it's like what happens is people, I guess that's what dangerous could mean. It's like what happens to their lives when the public decides to look away.
I see what you're saying. So not necessarily like, I didn't think of it that way. Like I was thinking more like interpersonal stuff.
Yeah.
But you're talking about something really important, which is like sort of systemic level.
And then like the limitation, like that only certain narratives get to come through, right? There's like certain supposed people that are identified, and then it like in the broader culture, it's like, okay, so this is what it means to be trans, or this is what it means to be Latina, or this is what it means to be plus size, or that these people become stand-ins for everyone else.
Everyone,
Yeah.
Yeah, and it becomes difficult in the way of, I was talking about this with like TV shows and like how I'll watch something like A Big Little Lies or like A Girls, and like it's not like doesn't really resemble my experience, but I can like go into it and like take bits of it that I can relate to and keep that. And like as a trans person or Latinx person, I've learned how to do that, but like the opposite hasn't happened.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Like a story completely about like a trans girl or like a girl of color, and like the culture will be like, well, why does she need to be this, or why does she need to, like, people don't know how to like relate to that, but we've all had to learn how to relate to whiteness. But when actors of color are cast for like something where the actors of color are needed, and it's like, well, that's like a James Bond. Like James Bond is British. He can't be black. It's like, why can't James Bond be black?
Yeah, I was just reading this morning, like randomly on a newspaper, in one of those like daily newspapers, you know, the free one, about the latest Doctor Who, being a woman, and
Everyone's up in arms.
yeah,
I watched Doctor Who religiously. I've seen all of the seasons. I love the show, and I've seen so many people that are just so upset about. I mean, I just don't get it.
that's what I don't get. So on the one hand, like I just, this sort of the energy that goes into fetishization, or to is like I see it as almost like on the flip coin of the energy that goes into all this anger and like frustration, where people can't. It's almost like they have this like mental block. Like there's no way Dr. Who can be a woman. There's no way that Idris Elba can be the next Bond, or.
Idris Elba was born to play Bond.
But I'm just like, what's the issue? What's really going on?
Right. Especially because Doctor Who's an alien. So it's like he's an alien and he regenerates. So he has different forms. He has 13 lives. So 13 regenerations. So this newest regeneration, that's coming, the new season that's going to start, the Doctor is going to be a woman. And for me, it's really interesting because the Doctor's like top nemesis in the show is also a Time Lord who regenerates, and in the last one, that Time Lord regenerated and was a woman, and nobody really said anything about the fact that this villainous male Time Lord alien regenerated and was a woman, and that the Doctor was now like their nemesis was this woman. Nobody made a big fuss about it then because it was the villain. I don't know if that's what it was or not, but now the Doctor is regenerated and is going to be a woman, and like everyone's up in arms, and it's like you didn't care 2 seasons ago when the Master regenerated was a woman.
Yeah, but she's still like a white sister, like Wonder Woman.
Right.
Yeah.
Or like like I don't know, I was thinking about this, like when is a fetish become dangerous? I was thinking also looking at this question like sharing videos of people being shot by police, and like how that has kind of become a fetish. And it's like, how quickly can you write your like status for it? And I think I've been guilty of it on the past too, because it's also like how like you feel like hopeless, and it's like weird if you don't talk about it on your social media presence. But like, when does it like go beyond like how many images like do we need to really see of a body that has been killed at the hands of the police? And like, is that a form of fetishizing like struggle and oppression online?
So what you're saying, like, the fetish is
I think people like
sharing a video?
Yeah, I think that because it's such a thing that happens over and over again. Like, how many times do we really need to see that? And like, do people? Is that like kind of like empathy porn for them? Like, does that make them feel like
I see what you're saying.
I'm a good person because I'm sharing this?
Kind of like the equivalent of like on TV showing certain images over and over again, or showing certain events over and over again.
Or like even like queer stories or trans stories just always being about like grief and like death. And like you never get to see those people be happy and have joy.
I mean, that's interesting because that kind of brings up again sort of like the role of media as sort of like a larger system thing, and it's like not having like the choices made as to how certain things are portrayed, you know? So I don't know, I think about like, you know, women that may be poor, maybe of color, you know, and the images are crying, have lost their children, whatever. That's not to say that that's not valid, but that's usually the images that we see, right?
And that's not everyone's story.
And that's not everyone's, even if it is their story, that's not how they are 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Yeah, it's not the defining moment of their life.
Yeah. So yeah, it's interesting. I didn't know something to think about it like that.
So I just want to check in and let everybody viewing know that you can participate in the conversation either via your chat box on your screen, or you can use the hashtag Chicas Charlando if you have any questions or comments or anything to contribute to the conversation. So in recent years, political correctness has become something that we've been striving for within our culture. And with language constantly changing, how do we give people a space to navigate this new territory and potentially say the wrong things?
I was thinking about how sometimes, maybe often, what is politically correct, it's like so dependent on like geography, race, class, access, like access to education, language, that, because the way I see things played out online and forums, and people get into arguments over language very often. But there's like it's like, yeah, it's like, it can become about semantics rather than intention, or like I think that there needs to be space for people to articulate something imperfectly with perfect intention. But that, and room to then sort it out together about what the correct language is in order for everyone to feel comfortable. And it seems like that room for that has been lost in the like quick response social media world. But that also, I mean, ultimately the people who are being described should get to articulate how they would like to be described, how they would like to be identified. And so I see that playing out that way.
No, I agree. Probably one of my newest like group agreements when I do trainings has been assume good intent. So in the process of creating this safe space and in our training room or in like this space where we're all going to be learning, you know, people are going to make mistakes. They may say the wrong thing, but in this room right now, we're going to make the assumption that their intentions were not bad in what they said. And if what they said was offensive to someone in the room, let's create a space where let's have a conversation about it. So I actually saw that at another training and I was like, this is amazing.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have this as one of my agreements in my trainings moving forward because it does happen. And especially in a space like that, like the intent is to learn. So we don't want to create a space where people feel like they can't voice what they want to say to be able to learn, to create a space to learn. But I think that when you're not in training, like you were saying, when it's like this, you're online, and it's social media, I think it's harder to create that space.
Yeah, and there are also people with all of the access to all of the knowledge who choose to use incorrect language and then rally against political correctness. And so, you know, that's one of those times where someone does not have perfect intention, right? But it's like using that as a excuse or
Yeah, and there's very much a culture of like of people that are ready to pounce.
Yeah.
When you say the wrong thing. And I just had a week where I had to be around like family members, and my sister was visiting, and my sister was 8 years older than me, so she's quite a bit older than me. And so when her friends would be around, they would all be like my older sisters. And I hadn't seen them since I was 12, and like a lot has changed since I was 12 years old. So I saw them during this week, and it was really nice, but when I used like the word cisgender, they were just like, what does that mean? And in place of saying cis, they said normal. So like, I didn't pounce on them because I knew what their intention, what they meant to say, and I knew that they didn't want to cause me harm. And I think I wanted to get upset, but I had to remember instances where I've been really grateful that, for example, like queer women or Black women have taken a moment to be like, this is the right thing to say, and what you said was just not okay. And like, I was really grateful to that, and I learned because of it. So I had to think back to that so that I could like keep it going and say like, here's what's wrong about what you just said. I'm not mad, but here's like a word that we use now because it just makes better sense, because you know, saying normal versus means I'm not normal, and they're like, oh, I didn't think about that. I just, you know.
Yeah. I mean, I'm gonna throw something out there because I've been sort of experiencing this, you know, something I think that we all experience throughout life, but I've been thinking about it a bit differently now, like, you know, I'd say the last couple of years. And so I do think intention is really important, but I also think that it's okay to feel uncomfortable and even to express that you're discomfort or that you're upset or that you're angry, even if you know that the intention was not necessarily one of harm. Because I do think that, like, I mean, this is a very specific case, like, this is like your family and friends that are almost like family, right? But I mean, that's exactly, like, I think it's great that, you know, you made this decision to sort of use it as a teachable moment. But I'm only saying for myself, like, I also think that, like, especially with people that I care about and that I know care about me, I can say to them, you know, like, that hurt my feelings. Like, I'm actually angry. Like, I wanted to, like, sort of lash out. Because I think it's important just to be authentic, you know, and also to sort of be willing to see what happens. Like, is the person, I had a situation recently with someone that I considered a friend that I had to sort of have an uncomfortable conversation with. And the person didn't take it well, and then I never heard from the person. That's their decision, you know? I don't know if I'm making any sense, but I think, like,
And sometimes, like, we're intuitive beings. We know when someone's trying to be hurtful. So,
Yeah, I think it's about like choosing. Like, I'm not going to be everyone's teacher.
yeah.
Like
no.
my sister's friends who've been hanging around me since I was born, sure. But like, if Paul Ryan wants me to explain stuff to him, I'll be like, well, Paul Ryan, you have access to a lot of things where you can teach yourself. So I'm not gonna like waste my energy teaching Paul Ryan, but I'll teach like the girl that grew up next door when I was little, because I care about being in solidarity with her. I don't care about being in solidarity with Paul Ryan.
I think the issue
I don't know why I think Paul Ryan.
is that Paul Ryan would not even want to like ask to like have a teachable moment. That's one of the many problems with Paul Ryan.
Yeah.
So we have a question from one of our viewers. How are we as CBOs and ASOs contributing to the fetishization of oppressed bodies in our marketing materials? And how can we combat this?
You do marketing.
I do, that's a really
Yeah.
great
That's
question.
a really good question.
How is it contributing? Well, I think that I know that we always try to have, diverse representation from models that are being photographed for campaigns. But if we're contributing to the fetishization, I don't know.
I think again, like, I think what would be the problem in a scenario that here is like they're photographed, like you see them, but you don't hear them.
Right.
Like that would be like how you're contributing if you were to like, okay, so we're gonna feature all trans models or all black models, but they're not gonna speak. And we're gonna cast all trans models or all black models one time. And then we'll meet our diversity quota, it'll be diversity day, and then that's it. So I think like intentional inclusion of like, not just for that one time, but like always, and make sure that they can speak if they want to or need to.
And I know we always have, our option anyway, have focus groups where consumers of the program are actively involved in developing the marketing materials, which I think also helps mitigate that issue, so that all these voices are represented in what is being produced. Certainly, we don't do it perfectly, but it's interesting to think about that.
When you think of that question.
Can you read the question again? There's a lot to it.
So how are we as CBOs and ASOs contributing to the fetishization of oppressed bodies in our marketing materials? And how can we combat this? So I was thinking specifically to a campaign that was done, and something similar. There was a focus group, and some of the feedback that came back was like, well, it's a really great campaign, but we just wish that you would have been more inclusive and included trans individuals in the poster. And it was really interesting because there was a trans identified person on the poster, but so culturally what this person was expecting someone to look like, that person to look like, it wasn't the same. And so that was the feedback that was given. So I think it's also comes down to like the culture, right, and society and how people are viewing things that we're putting out. That makes.
Yeah, and I think as CBOs, so really, how are I as CBOs contributing to the organization of oppressed bodies? And I think when we're conducting trainings, we might be contributing to it. So, for example, when I've done a training on like cultural competency, and I speak about the importance of like asking people the pronouns, or like using gender neutral pronouns. But like if I were to go into another training, like I completely leave all of that knowledge behind. Like I try to integrate it in a way so it's like no matter what the training is, everyone has a choice of introducing themselves with their pronouns, and we state very clearly at the beginning that like we will not tolerate like certain language, transphobic language, racist language. So I think integrating it into the way that we speak and not assuming someone's gender, if like we're watching a video, and like making like normalizing the use of like they them pronouns, like in all trainings, no matter what it's about. So for me, that's how I do it when I'm conducting a training, because I don't want to just like have like I said, like a cultural competency training and then kind of leave that. I kind of want to carry it into each training.
So keeping on with the topic about culture, culturally dating people of certain groups can be stigmatizing, and we talked about it a little bit earlier. So how have we as a society censored certain individuals who are trying to understand these desires that they're having?
Yeah, well with this I think about like men who have dated or would like to date trans women, and like it's stigmatized, but it's also like if they want to speak about it with someone who isn't the trans person they're dating, there's really no like forum that exists, which I think further puts them in isolation, because I think it enhances that feeling of, oh, I'm doing something that's weird or wrong or shameful. I think we haven't gotten to a place when a man says I like women, I don't think culturally people assume that means trans from cis women. I think they assume it means cis women.
Right. Yeah.
And so like that assumption I think is why there's no space for like someone to like say like, hey, this girl is trans and I love her, and feel good about it.
Yeah, when I was thinking about this, I was thinking about how, again, like sort of on a spectrum of things, I think it's like as a society, so at a larger level, I think like the fact that we still, it's 2016, there's still so much, 2017. There's still such an emphasis on sort of cisgender, heteronormative relationships.
Yeah.
That it's sort of like anything that falls out of that is still sort of is censored to lesser degree, to more degrees.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
I saw this magazine cover. I looked at the magazine. You guys probably know what magazine it was, but it was like a cis man and a cis woman together. And it was like, this is a queer relationship. And it was just like, I think it's because he identified as bisexual, that they were like, this is the face. They were like two white, cis, able-bodied, fit, conventionally attractive people. It was like, this is a queer relationship. And I think it was just because they were like in an open marriage and both bisexual.
I'm sorry, I snorted, but
I always wonder, like, how do you combat stigma without like normalizing or creating like a normative image of something, or like, or a rigid image of something, or like a specific, I think about like gay marriage, right? So like, you know, I think that in New York City anyway, the world that I travel in, and I think I'll be traveling, like, it's pretty like normal for gay people to be married, and like we have a lot of friends who are in relationships, and we, you know, maybe are married ourselves or whatever. And it, but it was like a pretty specific campaign that happened over many years, featuring many really normal looking, like white cisgender men right? And like, and so now like being gay maybe isn't stigmatized, but what that looks like in the world is really specific.
Mm-hmm.
And so like, how do we fight stigma without actually like making the field more narrow in a way, or more, am I making sense at all?
Yeah.
Yeah, I have to think about it, but I do, what I keep thinking, coming back to, is that there's always gonna be, what fuels stigmatization is the concept in a very theoretical sense, and in like the reality of how things play out of the other, right? So whenever anything is sort of like allowed to be the sacred, sort of like the norm, anything else is like, so I think at one point, the idea of, like I'm gonna even backtrack, of being a cisgender heteronormative couple, having sex and not married, was very stigmatized.
Right.
No one thinks, at least in this country, no one really thinks twice about that.
Right.
So it's almost like these different layers of what's, for lack of a better word, co-opted as the norm, and then what still remains as like the other, the dangerous, usually very dangerous, very threatening to some idea of like a moral that is what helps society function in a certain way. I don't know if that makes sense, but I think that that's really what it comes down to. It's like our society is built on this idea of a certain thing, and that we function in a certain way, and anything that's perceived as a threat is going to be.
What's tough is that I think that, like what you're saying, I think there's seemingly there's always been people that have been left behind in some way.
Mm-hmm.
Like, in order for gay marriage to be legalized, I think the image of it had to, in some ways, be white cis men, because we've learned to like idolize white cis men. So to be like, look, these white cis men are just like the ones you already know. They just sleep with jeans.
Right.
Or like the trans people that are like gaining visibility, like, and like the white men that were the face of gay marriage might be lovely people, but still like, and like the trans people who are gaining visibility, I worry that like non-binary and queer people and gender neutral people are left behind, because it's like the trans people that are getting the visibility are like seemingly straight, look cis, like behave in a certain way, play into respectability politics. So it's like how do like I even think within like certain groups, like I can speak, like in certain trans groups there's such a pressure to assimilate in a certain way, and to like visually, and like even with your vernacular, like to like stop speaking a certain way that you might, like for me there's definitely a way that I speak, like the way that I'm speaking now is not the way that I speak at when I'm in a bar full of trans girls. Like there's a way that I speak around them, but I know that when I enter other places, and like I have to speak like this, because this is the more cis, sort of I'm using like ballroom slang, and like I'm drunk and like throwing those words around. Like I just know that like, oh, I'm gonna be read as trans for this, so I can't do this in public.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is that the sort of framework of thinking of things is not with the idea or the understanding that multiple things can exist at the same time. It's always like, well, it has to be this way, like it has to be, you know, a certain only one model, and that we are supposed to be thankful that finally that model is being allowed to be in the sort of mainstream. And so then it becomes like this sort of push-pull thing, because on the one hand, it's like, oh, there's more diverse representation in media, but it's not necessarily diverse representation. It's just more diverse in relation to what existed before. And so I think part of it is that those frameworks,
I think they exist, but they're not allowed to be spoken of, like, very openly, because there's always this push-pull of like, well, you know,
It's
we
like a
should be
one
happy that there's, you know, gay marriage is legalized now, but it's also like, yes, I am happy, but there's also a lot of other things that need attention.
Yeah, it's like the Moonlight versus La La Land thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like I didn't watch La La Land. I'm sure it was really good. There are like a lot of iterations of that kind of movie. There was like only one Moonlight, so like it was so special in that it deserved to win, but it also seems like that kind of movie only comes out every few years, and they get one shot, and like 100 La La Lands get made before one Moonlight will get made. So yeah, it seems like there's like always like one shot to prove everything for everyone at once, which is I don't know, overwhelming, I guess, a little.
Yeah. So we're coming to the end of our time together. So I just have one last question for you guys. So in your opinion, what should partners of people from marginalized groups consider as they're entering in a relationship with someone who may constantly have to face racism, sexism, trans misogyny, or body shaming?
I mean, I can, what comes into my head is that know what you don't know. So like, be aware of what you're not the expert on someone else's life. And it's okay to not know things, and it's okay to ask, obviously very respectfully, but like, questions. And I also think that it's not, I often will hear, like I listen to Dan Savage a lot, and a lot of interesting, obviously, issues come up in his podcast. But to me, it's always very interesting how there's this sort of, I don't know if it's a human thing, but like this need to like sort of want to compete with each other about like certain things. And it's like, this is not a competition. Like, your experience is always going to be different from someone else's, and it's, if you're not the expert on someone else's life or experience, you know, just own it,
Right.
you know?
Yeah, I think I think a lot about this, but I think the main thing is not to zoom about my last relationship, but in my last relationship, it was his first time in a relationship with a trans woman, and I think he handled it really well, but I think that was because like I was like, you have to like also do your own homework as well. Like I can't like do that. I can't teach you everything, and like also you need to. I can't be in every single space that you're in, and like when you're at band practice with like 5 dudes who like don't even know what being trans is, and I'm drinking, you're drinking beers. Like that's when you need to like put a stop to like transphobic jokes that you might hear, or like bring it to their attention, because like you can hang out with me and my friends and we can all like talk about how much trans misogyny and racism and body shaming, how all these things suck. But it's more impactful when you take that into parts of your life where those conversations don't exist. So I would say anyone who's dating someone who might face racism, sexism, trans misogyny all the time, like bring that around into spaces that they can't be.
I agree. Yeah, I think you said it really well.
Do your homework too.
Yeah.
I like that.
Do your homework, yeah. And that was like the follow-up question, is like, how much responsibility is it for them, for that partner to do their homework? I feel like there's only but so much that, I can do, right? Or I can teach you.
Yeah, so
Without
really just,
you wanting to, like, you have to want to learn that on your own also.
Yeah.
yeah, it's like I got a face mask on in your bed, like, can we not talk about violence right now? Like,
Right.
can we talk about it with your friends?
Yeah.
Like, can we just run Netflix?
Right.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's also a form of self-care. Like, this is the place where I feel like I can be comfortable and not have to have these conversations or like be teaching everyone, right? If I
Yeah.
teach all day, this is what I teach, and then when I'm with my partner, like, I would like to take the time to not have to be teaching all the time on some of these topics. And that's like self-care for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's my thought.
It's also like I'm wary of folks that are like looking always to me to be the one to like teach them or be their therapist or their, like I'm now like, I think you can handle learning this stuff on your own. I'm gonna be fine. Yeah, I know these things.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like when I say I don't want to.
When I get home, I'm tired.
Right.
Like when I say I don't want to on my social media space, for example, and they'll be like, well, how do you expect people to accept you then?
Well, I did accept a lot of bullshit. I'm like, no one was like,
Because I'm like, person,
yeah.
can you just let me live?
So I think we've come to the end of our time today for this episode. I want to thank everyone on the panel for joining the conversation. Thank you to everybody who viewed. Thank you for submitting questions and joining the conversation as well. In the chat box, we posted a link to a survey. We want to get your guys' feedback. We want to get the feedback of all the folks who are viewing or have viewed in the past. So we can get your feedback and really work towards crafting these monthly webcasts so we can cover topics that you guys want to hear about, and all that stuff is in the survey. So please fill it out, provide feedback for us, and we'll see you guys next month. Chicas, Charlando. Bye.
Bye-bye.